In this video, I'm going to show you 5 high-level gambits that you can confidently play against anyone, be it in a classical match, rapid blitz or bullet. In case you missed it, yesterday I presented 5 dubious gambits that really work even against higher rated opponents. But today it's a different story. We are looking at high level gambits that you can highly depend on. High level gambit number 1, the Queen's Gambit, obviously. Beginning with the move pawn to d4. Then after d5, you simply go pawn to c4. Some chess experts have argued to say the Queen's Gambit is not really a gambit if you think about it, for so many reasons. Number 1, it's because after d takes c4, you can easily get back this pawn after giving a check as highlighted, not to mention that 90% of your opponents won't even accept the Queen's Gambit. They don't take on c4. But anyways, it is what it is. It's still the Queen's Gambit, right? So let me show you 2 great ways of playing this so-called QGD. Pawn to c6 is the Slav defense, pawn to e6 is the Queen's Gambit declined, and knight f6 is the Marshall defense. So, against the Slav defense, I propose you go knight f3, the main line, and after the top played move knight f6, you want to develop your queen's knight, that's fine. So you start with the 2 knights first, then after pawn to e6, the top played move, you simply go queen c2. Honestly speaking, move order here doesn't matter. Sometimes you can start with queen c2, and after pawn to e6, you even play pawn to e3. Sooner or later, black is going to play knight bd7, after which you now go knight c3, controlling the e4 square. Now wait, this is not going to be boring. You are just waiting for black to develop his dark squared bishop for you to play pawn to g4, which is called the Shabalov attack. And that's the top played move, by the way, bishop d6. The moment you see this move, you want to be aggressive and take most of your opponents out of their prep. So you go pawn to g4. This move will confuse most of your opponents. It's like the Keres attack gambiting the second pawn. People who play the semi-Slav are positional players. They like solid positions. They just want to take things at ease without rushing. So they won't just be ready for these kinds of attacks yet. So you want to catch them before they wake up. If they take this pawn, now you go rook g1. So you see the whole idea of playing pawn to g4 once the dark squared bishop stops guarding the g7 pawn. Theory here says for black to survive, they have to play queen f6, which is very difficult to see. If you check the Lichess database, you will see that knight takes h2 is the top played move, which is okay, but the whole idea is to just stop black from castling short and play an open game, which is attacking. You're going to develop your light squared bishop and your dark squared bishop and castle long. That's the whole idea. Besides, you're attacking the h7 pawn. If black doesn't take on h2, let's say they see queen f6, you can just go ahead and take that knight. And of course, they're going to take your undefended knight on f3. That was the whole purpose of playing queen f6. And now you continue with your aggressive line. Rook takes g7. If bishop takes, you simply take the h7 pawn. So word of advice, you are not way better as white. No, this is just an equal game. You just want to surprise your opponent, giving them more chances to blunder, because most people are not just good defenders and they don't study these things. So if you play this in a classic tournament, you are guaranteed to win more. In fact, I should confess to say, I lost a game like this to one strong chess player called James Chiwiye in Zambia. Shame. Magnus also played this line in 2009 if you check the Masters database. Anyway, after pawn to d6 and g4, if black doesn't take, the other move you're going to see is pawn to h6. Now it's up to you to go pawn to g5. That's if you want, just doing everything that you do in the Keres attack. Or you can also play rook g1 here. No need to go h4, by the way. You will just lose your g4 pawn and black will be able to defend as highlighted. So rook g1 is justifiable, intending to go g5 next and see how difficult this gambit is. The only accurate move in this position is hard to see. Pawn to e5 is what black should play here, not what I played in the game against my opponent, pawn to g5, because this invites the move pawn to h4 or even bishop d2, and then they'll castle long. They'll be very fast in development and you're going to struggle. So black here should play pawn to e5. This is the only messiah move, after which you should go ahead and take on d5, simplify the game. And after cd, you now go knight b5, hitting on this bishop. Black has to play bishop b8, otherwise you have knight c7 check and you're going to win the rook. So bishop b8 is forced. And then you go pawn to g5. So you see what you're doing, just keeping your opponent up on his toes and playing an active game. If h takes g5, you have knight takes g5. By the way, if a6 is played, here you can even play knight e6. Look at this move, you guys. Cold-blooded move, almost trapping the queen. The idea is if queen e7 is played, you have a mate in 2, which I would love you guys to find and write your answers in the comment section down below. If black plays something like queen a5 check, you have bishop d2. If they play queen b6, once again, I would love you guys to find the best continuation from here because I believe it is easy. This is how you learn chess, not just by watching. Anyway, so that was about the Queen's Gambit versus the Slav. How about if black plays pawn to e6? Well, the thing with the Queen's Gambit declined is it has a lot of transpositions. Maybe sooner or later black will play pawn to c6, go back to the Slav and all that. So once again, you just keep it cool. Begin with knight f3 like you do in the Slav. Knight c3 was also possible, but that may transpose to the Nimzo Indian, kind of. You don't want this pin. They'll play knight f6. And then this is when you play knight c3. And the moment black plays bishop b4 or bishop e7 or whatever, that's when you want to play pawn to g4 like before. So let's say bishop e7 in this position. Now you go pawn to g4 because the dark squad bishop is no longer guarding the g7 pawn. So once black takes, now this makes sense because you want to go rook g1 and win that pawn. In this position, there's nothing better black can do apart from retreating the knight, allowing you to take. And now, Stockfish is on your side. The eval bar is up. You just prevented black from castling short, and now the game is no longer going to be boring. You will trade on d5, develop your bishop, your queen on a4 maybe, castle long, bishop g2, pawn to e4, you break open the center, etc. Similarly, after you play knight c3, if black doesn't play bishop e7 and say they go bishop b4, once again you can consider this move pawn to g4 because the dark squad bishop is no longer guarding this. By the way, if dc, you just continue pawn to g5 and here your opponent is more likely going to play knight e4 or knight d5, just putting more pressure on your knight, but you can just go bishop d2. You're way advanced on the king side, ready to attack if black castles short. In this position, say black takes with the knight, well, you can just take back with the pawn, and after something like bishop e7, you can now get back your pawn like this. You go queen a4 check, and say after something like knight d7 or bishop d7, this is when you take. The game is equal, but you just managed to disturb black's plan. If they go ahead and castle short, you can even go pawn to e4 here. h4, h5, pop. You just want to play aggressively and attack your opponent. High level gambit number 2, the Evans Gambit. By the way, this is just my order. You can come up with yours. e4, e5. Now you go knight f3. And after knight c6, of course you play bishop c4 as if it's the normal Italian. But after bishop c5, you don't castle short. You don't play c3. You don't play pawn to d3. But pawn to b4. Yes, this is not very common at super grandmaster level, but honestly speaking, are you really a super GM? Anyway, this is playable at grandmaster level, even international master. Trust me, the Evans Gambit still has a lot of venom. One beautiful line that I can show you is after bishop takes, you go pawn to c3. Bishop f5 and bishop c5 are the most popular moves. If bishop c5, you now go pawn to d4. After e takes d4, you take back, and then look at this, you guys. The moment black plays bishop back to b4 check, this is when you surprise them by not blocking the check with your bishop or with your knight, but instead you play king f1. Done. And I can guarantee you to say 90% of your opponents will lose their games on the next move after they play the top played move in the Lichess database, pawn to d6, which is a very big mistake. A blunder, so to speak, because this allows you to win a free piece. So you just go pawn to d5, and whatever black does, say knight e5, you can even start like this, pop, and after pawn takes, you now go queen a4 check, and on the next move, win that poor bishop. I won't say much about the Evans Gambit because I already have a full video on this old gambit. You can check it out in the card above. High level gambit number 3, the Reti Gambit. Beginning with the Zucatot opening, and then you play pawn, kind of the Queen's Gambit though, but you haven't played d4 yet, so you're just waiting for black to take, which is called the reti accepted. Now arguably this is not yet a gambit, it only becomes one after you play pawn to e3. I know some people might argue, but the whole idea is if black tries to hold on to his extra pawn, now you start attacking on the queen side immediately, beginning with the move a4. This is what you always do. If pawn to c6, you're going to take back your pawn and they won't be able to take because of rook takes a8. So they like playing the move pawn to c6, but still you take on b5. And if cb happens, you still go for that b5 pawn. You want to take it, right? And I've seen a lot of people doing this, but you have queen a4 check and then you're going to grab that b4 pawn and the c4 pawn. So the other move they play is bishop d7 in this position, but this is when you go knight e5, as if you want to get rid of that bishop so that you can take. When you look into the Lichess database, knight f6 is the top played move, which is a losing mistake, because this allows you to go queen f3, and there are some issues to do with the rook on a8. For example, knight c6 doesn't work in this position because you can just take, that's just a free piece. By the way, if black takes, you have queen takes c6 check and the game is over. So after knight c3, bishop d7 is a losing mistake due to knight e5 with queen f3. According to Stockfish, the best black can do to hold on to his extra pawn is to go queen b6. But this invites knight d4 anyways, you just want to get back your pawn, right? Worse off, if pawn to b4, you have knight d5. And say queen c5, here you can even fancy a little bit with the move knight b5, knowing black can't take any of the knights due to knight c7 check, and you're going to win that queen. So this is another high level gambit that you can try. Of course, it's called the reti opening, not really a gambit, because after all, you have an option to go queen a4, check, and then grab that pawn back. The same thing that you can do even in the queen's gambit. But in most cases, black doesn't take on c4 after you play c4 anyway. Here the top played move is pawn to c6. And to keep everything simple for you guys, this is when you can play everything that I showed you in the queen's gambit. For example, if you don't want to, continue playing the reti, you can simply go pawn to d4, playing what you know, so that after knight f6, you go knight c3. Remember we played this, I showed you this line in the queen's gambit. After e6, you're just waiting for black to develop the dark squared bishop for you to go pawn to g4, disturbing their plan. So you just go pawn to e3, and after knight bd7, you play queen c2, delaying a little bit, and immediately after bishop d6, this is when you go pawn to g4, disturbing black's plans. Again, this is called the Shabalov attack. I'm not going to repeat this. High level gambit number 4, the Scotch gambit. After e4, e5, knight f3, and knight c6, you go d4. If you are an intermediate level player or a beginner, I highly recommend that you start playing this gambit called the Scotch gambit, because one, it's very easy to play and you're going to have a lot of attacking opportunities. That's what you want to be doing when you are an intermediate level player, attacking to checkmate your opponent like this, and the queen. So after pawn takes, you don't take back immediately because that will no longer be a gambit, so you play bishop c4, and most of your opponents are going to play knight f6 here, and this is where you want to play pawn to e5 according to theory. But I'm not just a fan of this, because after e5, black has d5, forcing you to go bishop b5, and then after knight e4, you take on d4. I mean, this is just a dead eco game, very much playable by the way, but I am not just a fan. Instead of playing pawn to e5, you can also try this fried liver line where you play knight g5, targeting the f7 pawn. This will confuse a lot of your amateur opponents and you're going to win a lot of games. The move they play mostly is pawn to d5, after which you can gladly take, but after knight takes d5, you don't take on f7 yet, because black has queen e7 check, and they will take your knight with the queen to indirectly defend their knight. So you don't rush with knight takes f7 like you do in the normal fried liver attack. The move you want to play is castle shot first, so that now it makes sense for you to sacrifice your knight like this, and after king takes, you go queen f3 check, and then sooner or later you're going to win back that piece. At least you managed to make black lose his right to castle. Another line after bishop c4 is where black plays bishop c5. After this, you have an option to go knight g5 again and sack your knight, or just go pawn to c3. If d takes c3, there's this fancy move for you guys, especially intermediate level players. Bishop takes f7 check. After king takes, making black lose his right to castle, by the way. Now you go queen d5 check, and then on the next move you don't even take the bishop yet, though that's fine. First of all, you give a check, provoking a weakness on the king side, and then this is when you take like this. Black should never even think of capturing on b2 because they are just helping you to activate your bishop. The only move here is knight f6, by the way, after which you can now go pawn to e5. So this is very bad for your opponent. You're going to win a lot of games with the Scotch Gambit. I have a lot of videos on the Scotch, so I'm not going to repeat content. In fact, some of these traps are even included in my new e5 defense course, which you guys need to check out, like right now. I covered all these things and how to avoid these kinds of traps if you are playing black pieces. Right. The last high level gambit that I have for you guys is one that has no name, or you can just call it the elbow gambit, beginning with e4. So this works against the perk defense, or against the pierce defense, where you now go pawn to d4 and immediately black plays knight f6. You forget about knight c3, you forget about bishop d3 or anything else. The move is bishop c4. If you check the Masters database, you will still find some games played like this. The main line goes as follows: knight takes, and then again you sacrifice your bishop to make your opponent lose their right to castle, and then you go queen h5 check. After g6, this is how you win back your piece. So the plan is very simple here: h4, h5, mess up black's pawn structure, knight f3, knight g5, knight c3, depending on what your opponent is doing, your castle long, blah blah blah. This also reminds me of the Ginsburg variation against the Sicilian defense, where black plays c5 and you go knight f3, after pawn to d6 you go d4, pawn takes, knight takes, then immediately they play knight f6. You don't defend your pawn, but you go bishop c4. Once again, this is called the Ginsburg Gambit. So you're offering black to take your e-pawn so that you can gladly take on f7 and then play queen h5, and after g6 you get back your piece like this. You can try a similar move order even against the Ali Hines defense, where you ignore your e4 pawn and you first go bishop c4, so that after knight takes you go bishop takes, and after king takes you go queen h5 check, after pawn to g6 you go queen d5 check, and then get back your piece. You have h4, h5, pop, knight f3, knight c3. I mean, in some lines, you can even win the c7 pawn after queen f4 check. Most people like blocking the check with the queen. Now this is when you capture on c7 like this, and you are better as white. So these are some of the high level traps that you guys can depend on. Let me know which one you love, or something that I did not cover in this video. Now, time for you to go and check out my new e5 defense course, which I have also linked in the comment section down below. And I'm glad to say, so far it has received a lot of attention and people are getting it like crazy. So it's an opening response that you try against white's e4 opening. You're going to learn how to play against the Scotch, the Royal Pace, the Bishop's opening, 3 Knights opening, the 4 Knights game, the Vienna game, even the Italian game. So it's the complete e5 defense course that I just launched with my team. You better go and check it out. Thank you so much for watching this video. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.